And so I'll call up Alan Lee to do the introductions and key us off with that. I will mention for people going on the tour, the bus is available. So one of our speakers was not able to make it today. So if we do conclude a little early, just stay tuned. We'll direct you to the bus, and we can go up on the tour when this panel's over. So again, I'll let you know more about that when we get to go. But with that, I'll turn this panel over to Alan Lee. Thanks, Alan.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Good afternoon. What an enlightening day it's been, and certainly this panel will hope to continue that theme of enlightening us with such great information all day. I'm Alan Lee. I own and operate a charter fishing business based in Manasquan Inlet, New Jersey, which for the locals is a short ride, and if you're not from the area, Manasquan Inlet is about 15, 18 miles south, right along the coast. I've been in professional fishing for almost 5 decades now, and I find this has just been such an enlightening day. I also have a couple other hats in more recent decades that I've taken on that have to do with conservation, including serving as a technical advisor to the U.S. delegation of ICAT, the International Commission on Conservation of Atlantic Tunas. And more recently, I joined the proposed Hudson Canyon Sanctuary Advisory Council, put together by NOAA. I currently have one of the recreational seats, but I also serve as the chair. So I've had the opportunity to interact with many of you, and it's always great. So today we've got this afternoon's presentation. The general theme is on sustainable ocean use. And while there was originally supposed to be 4 presenters, we're going to have 3 presenters. And they have a great lineup of different subjects. But the general theme through this is going to be on the sustainable use of the ocean. The first presenter is going to be Dr. Susan Inglis, and she's going to talk about working with the scallop industry. The second presenter will be Dr. Dana Christensen from Stockton, and she's going to present on bridging a gap between recreational anglers and conservation researchers. And our third presenter is John Weber, and he's going to talk about curbing ocean plastics. Okay? So the format, each of the presenters is going to take about 13, 14 minutes approximately. And we'll hold questions for the last 15 minutes of our hour, okay? So with that in mind, why don't we have Dr. Inglis come up, and it's all yours, okay? All right, thanks.
Okay. Page down, or this one? This one? I did that. Sorry. While he's doing that, my name's Susan Inglis. I'm a senior research associate with the Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation out of Rhode Island. Oh, so which, this one?
Yeah, forward arrow.
Forward? Okay. And I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge my co-authors who some of their work I'll be presenting. Okay, so today I'm actually going to be presenting some work we're doing that works with commercial fisheries. So basically we're looking at changing ocean conditions from the perspective of commercial fishermen through 2 projects that we have. The first one is working with the scallop industry, where we worked with them to actually come up with some management recommendations. The second one is working with fishermen to fill in the data gaps. And that's part of the CFRF Hui Shelf Fleet, research fleet, which Glenn talked about this morning. And then I'll just have a few closing remarks. So I put in all these definitions and things, but Glenn's covered all this. So the thing to take from this slide is that for commercial fishermen, the big thing about warm core rings is that it can change where and when you fish and what target species you're fishing as well. Another thing I want to talk about is ocean acidification. Basically, ocean acidification is carbon dioxide from the air, is added to seawater, and it changes the water chemistry in a predictable way, basically reducing pH and carbonate levels in the ocean. And this is really important for scallops and other mollusks because they require calcium carbonate to grow and maintain shells. One of the things you're going to see on our graphs is called the saturation state, and this is a measure of the carbonate concentrations. So the lower the saturation state, the lower the carbonate. And what you see on the right-hand side, this was a laboratory experiment, is the normal shell shape that you should have, and then 3 deformed ones that were actually raised with a low pH. So how do these changing ocean conditions impact scallop biology? Basically, what we know is scallops experience mortality at temperatures that exceed 18 degrees Celsius. They get mortality from oxygen levels that are too low. You get potential mortality exists for variables that have a saturation state lower than 1.5. And this is a big thing. The combined stressors of ocean acidification and warming can provide less energy for growth and reproduction. So this is what commercial scallopers are looking at when they're looking at changing ocean conditions. When we started this project, one of the most challenging things for us was to convince the scallop industry that ocean acidification was something that they really need to think of now. Because to them, that's something that was off in the future. And they had more pressing things they had to think about. In particular, the warming ocean temperatures, which they all see and experience when they go out fishing. And I will say, an offshore wind is another big topic as well. But I want to point out that we are starting to see hotspots of ocean acidification impact. And we have some right off here, and another hotspot is up in the Gulf of Maine. So this is something that is happening now. It's not way off in the future anymore. Another thing I want to point out is that as far as for the scallop industry, we have seen a marked decline in harvest in the mid-Atlantic scallop fishery. Another thing we found is that the mean shell thickness in scallops has declined over time as well. And what happens when the shell thickness declines is that when the scallops come in, you get broken shells and cut meats. So, with all that happening, how do we build resiliency in the fishery? And I want to mention that this team is made up of chemical oceanographers, scallop biologists, and social scientists. And what we did is we all got together and we conducted workshops with the scallop industry in different scallop fishing communities to discuss ocean conditions, answer the questions, and find out how is it impacting them? What are they seeing now? What are they concerned about? And then what we did is each year, they provided us with questions they had. We made sure the next year we had answers for them. So if they had a question, we tried to find the answer for them, and we came back next year and answered it for them. And this actually produced a really good trust level. So we had fishermen coming back year after year because they were part of the process for this. And so after that, 3 years of interactive workshops, we developed management recommendations. And then last year, in our 2024 workshop, we presented it to the participants and asked for their response. These are the places we held the workshops: Massachusetts and Rhode Island, New Jersey, Barnegat Light, and Virginia, Newport News. And you're going to notice that you don't see any 2022 workshops. And the reason for that is because after our first workshop, they all said, no. We were holding them in the fall, and they said, don't hold them in the fall. We're all fishing then. You have to go in the spring. So we had to push it into the spring. So as I said, if they had questions, we tried to respond to them. So just an example of workshop feedback, shells feel thinner. That graph I showed you about the shell thickness, that wasn't part of the original project. But they asked the question. We actually conducted a study to look at it. And that graph is actually made up of over 4,000 shells that were analyzed for that. Okay, you can see, so each one of these questions they had, we came back and we tried to answer it. But one of the big questions they had was, well, what can we do? Like, this is happening, what can we do? So this was to try to answer the what can we do question. So we came up with these management recommendations. I'll just go over them with you. We had 7 of them. So basically, the idea is that scallops are on a rotational closure for areas open and close. And the idea is that this will probably change over time. And should they be informed by observations and models of conditions? So if you have really poor conditions in one area, should you be opening them or closing them? And then the question was, how do we do that? Opportunities exist to engage scallop industry in observing systems. So what barriers exist to have the fishermen start collecting data for us? Increase the flexibility with days at sea clock, in and out. What that is that they only have so many days to catch their catch. You know, so if they have to go farther away to do it, that impacts them. So this one particularly, number 3, was really important to the Mid-Atlantic communities. Because if they're going up to Georges Bank, you know, they have to they don't want the clock on them. Scallop enhancement, this was interesting. In the past, I've worked with fishermen for a long time. In the past, they haven't been for this, but all of a sudden there seems to be more interest in the whole scallop enhancement component. Adding ocean acidification to the SAMS model. The SAMS model is what determines what they get each year, is what they can catch. So, and the idea is, should that be added in to their calculations? Augment rotational management areas with real-time observers. So the idea is that we would actually provide to the fishermen real-time observations. And that question was, if we gave that to you, would you use it? And then alter seasonality of the fishery. Reconsider fishing during warmer months, because for scallops to come on board, if it's really hot, if they're on the deck and they're sorting through a pile, like that takes time. Any bycatch or any smaller juvenile scallops that would be put overboard are usually dead because they're just cooking. They're on the thing. So we presented that to the participants and got their feedback. And this is what we found, was that rotational management informed by observations and models, most of them really agreed with that. You see here, there was more disagreement in Newport News area, and the reason for that is because they're a bit skeptical of the models. And the reason for that is they think that they'd rather wait, you give me a model, and then do a retrospective analysis and see how close were you. So that they want to see a bit more of that before they'll really buy into that. But overall, that was something they all thought was really good, and everybody thought that the industry should be engaged in collecting observations. So that was 100%. Days at sea, clock flexibility, as I said, they're all in agreement there, but New Bedford fishermen weren't as interested in that as the Mid-Atlantic, which you can understand why. And the one thing that they weren't interested in at all was changing the seasonality of the fishery. That was a no-go. Just before I finish with that, how do I go back? Oh, there we go. So this is where we are right now with this project. We received a no-cost extension, so we're going to be doing another set of workshops next year. And I want to let you know that we are actually presenting this to NOAA. So we have interaction with them. This is actually moving forward. And this is a sort of a really nice project of bringing the stakeholders into the management decision. Now, the other project we're working on is working with industry to fill data gaps is the salinity maximum intrusion project, which Glenn talked about. And so I won't go through all this again, except the thing to notice is that, the intrusions are often associated with warm core rings. So we're hearing warm core rings again. That one we already saw. This one too, you've already seen about the shelf leaf research. So I'm just going to skip on to some new information, okay? And this is how the shelf leaf data moves onshore, because Glenn talked to you about this program we have. And how this works with the Salinity Max Intrusion Project is that the fishermen will go out with the CTDs bi-weekly in designated fishing zones, and they're collecting conductivity, temperature, and depth, okay? And then we provide iPads via Bluetooth to the fishermen, so they can upload data from the CTD, and then that is actually put into our Dropbox at CFRF, so we get the data, it's just sent to us. And we do the initial quality control, and then we send it to Hui, who cleans and processes the data, and the results are then posted to the public. And how that works with Salinity Max is that Glenn was talking to you about the cruises that they go on. What these fishermen's data provides is they'll say, oh, we saw an intrusion here. It looks like an intrusion here. We've seen this, like this. They're basically telling them where to focus their research cruise. It helps them sort of reduce the resolution. You saw where we're collecting the data right now, but I wanted to let you know that we are expanding the shelf fleet. We have 2 vessels from Mid-Atlantic, and we're trying to get more. We're really working hard and trying to get more vessels from the Mid-Atlantic. Also, the Cape Cod Commercial Fishermen's Alliance is starting to put data into this portal as well. And Fishermen on the Front Lines, this is a NOAA funding source. It purchased 2 new CTDs that will measure fluorescence, so chlorophyll A. So we're going to start collecting chlorophyll data as well. And please take a look at this link here. If you go to that link, all of our data is there with a user-friendly interface. So you can get the data, all of our data from there. So I guess for closing remarks, what I'd like to say is that engaging with fishermen if there's a problem is really important, because they'll tell you what their key areas of concerns are, and they can help formulate the potential management recommendations, because they know what would work for them and what won't work for them. So it's really important, and they're really engaged. Like, they really want to be part of this. And the other thing is that the feedback we got from them was that there is an ability for the industry to adapt to challenges. Like, they feel they can adapt. And sometimes this is a sort of, if you just target one target species versus maybe having multiple target species, it can make a big difference on how resilient that community is going to be to changes. And also, fishers work year-round. It's like often the surveys are done just once a year or twice a year, but fishermen are working all the time, so they can help fill data gaps to monitor changes that impact commercial fisheries. I'd like to acknowledge the communities that hosted our workshops and all the fishermen and stakeholders that attended. And they did put a lot of time and thought into it. I had emails going back and forth with them after the workshops, what's this? Can I help here? And also the captains and crews of the shelf fleet research and the onshore support, and there are many more people. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan, for that presentation and also the work that you're doing. It's always so important to see how research translates into practice or some type of application, and it's great to see that the work that you're doing there is being used. So our next presenter is Dr. Dana Christensen from Stockton, talking about bridging the gap between recreational anglers and conservation researchers.
I heard it was the down button. Got it. All right. So my name is Dana Christensen, and I'm an adjunct at Stockton University. Being an educator is one of my many hats, and I have a lot of excitement about this because many of what you all spoke about, or some of the topics that came up today, can be seen in this research project that I have. So some of the 3 facets that I'm going to introduce here are recreational saltwater anglers, right? Now, if you approach saltwater anglers, depending on who they are, where you're meeting them, right? If it's in a bait shop, or you're meeting them at a conference, you're meeting them here, there's going to be a little bit of a different approach. But generally, we see that saltwater anglers, at least locally, have distrust in various communities. And not only do they have distrust, but they can also bring a unique body of knowledge to us. And when I say us, I mean researchers. And overall, they're very dissatisfied with fisheries management practices. Not all of them, but you might get a few that say that, or say things along those lines. Now, there are also many citizen science projects. There's a couple going on at Monmouth. There's a few that are going on in Massachusetts, right? We're hearing this come up. I'm gonna say one reason might be because they're inexpensive, right? You have people who are going out and fishing, and they're going out and doing these things either for their own pleasure or for some other reason, but they're already out. So if we can train them or utilize them, they could also collect data that would help, right? In contributing to this data gap that we've all been talking about. And I'm gonna bring up an example, eBird, if there's any avid birders in here, to hopefully show you what I mean by this model of citizen science. It's a unique model that has been successful. And then I think that we're all researchers or educators to some extent, right? Depending on whether you're teaching at a college, you're teaching your kids, you're talking to people in the community, right? You're talking to graduate students. And I'm sure that you've heard people say, why don't they just fix that? Like, who's they? What do you mean, right? And there's so much misconception out there. So I think science education is really a nice way to kind of address some of these problems in terms of being able to maintain sustainability and encourage sustainability on all these different levels. So here's my eBird example. Now, do I think that recreational anglers are gonna have the same response to this? No, so I'll put that out there first. But if you use eBird or know anyone that uses eBird, this is a citizen science project that was developed by Cornell. Now, I'm one person, right? Like, I'm not gonna be able to do this to this level. However, I looked at the model that they started at. And they started by gathering information from their birders. What did the birders want? What were the birders' issues? What were the birders' trust problems? What did they want, right? You don't want to go to the birders and say, you know, give me all your data when you're going birding. What did they want in return, right? So it's kind of this give and take. And there had to be a lot of partnerships with the birders to get them to want to participate. And I think it's over 15 years now. If you've ever been to Cornell's website or used this app, it's very developed, it's informative to the users, and now, when the birders enter the information about where they're seeing birds or what they're seeing, they can now look on a map and see where those birds are flying, see, you know, an entire map of the United States or the world, and because everyone's putting in their data to this location, now it's usable to everyone. The scientists aren't being paid to go out and tag birds as often, right, because they can be in the lab running these models and doing bigger things, essentially, getting more data. So again, do I think that it's going to be the same for recreational anglers? Absolutely not. But right, it's a model which we want to understand the anglers to potentially maybe do something along these lines, right? Being able to gather data from them. So we know that there are certain ways that we gather data from our recreational anglers. Another talk brought up MRIT, right? So there's angler intercept surveys. I've talked to some of the individuals who do these surveys, some benefits, some drawbacks, right? There's phone surveys, mail surveys, volunteer angler surveys with the state. And there, again, some pros and some cons to these things. But overall, this area is data poor in terms of one of the big things that I've seen is anglers that are going out to fish and they're capturing fish that are not of recreational size, they throw them back. So if they're throwing them back, what is the rate that they're throwing them back at, and then the mortality for each different species will be different, right? And based on the age and based on the length. So we don't know a lot about that, especially in the state. We also know that students at different levels need to learn about sustainability. So if they're actually we're going to be successful in sustainability, we need to do it at the level of what we've talked about today. The individual researchers, the individuals making the policy, the individuals teaching, right? There's so many different facets to approach sustainability, and they all need to be on the same page. Now, we know that there's this gap that exists between anglers and researchers. And when you do citizen science projects, research shows that these projects need to be very discipline specific, right? If you're talking about birds, you're talking about different species of fish, you're gonna have different trust and buy-in based on the species that you're even talking about, utilizing. Now, being able to increase participation in some of these kinds of projects is understanding the participant, understanding the anglers, right? So in order to develop angler trust, we have to try to figure out how to do that. And that's where I kind of jumped in and said, I really want to understand why these people are so angry. So that was my original thought, right? And I wanted to do this in a systematic way and actually quantify it. So that went way too fast. I'm going the other way. let me use the screen. So I like to use this analogy as well because if you talk to a researcher or someone who's in the field, they might say, oh, the water's turbid today. And you might know what that means, right? We might know what that means. But then you talk to a fisherman, and they're like, oh, the water's dirty. And I'm like, no, the water's turbid, right? And we're saying the same thing. So there's, these people are going out and fishing for fun, for other reasons, right? And there's so much information that they have. Oh, on this phase of the moon, you have to use this lure, and you're going to get this fish. And there's some knowledge to that. There's some actual truth in what they're saying. And when I hear some of these things that I hear over and over again, I'm like, let me try to find a paper on that. And I'm like, there is no paper. Like, I'm looking at fisheries journals, I'm looking at physiology journals, I'm looking in different places, and these things that seem to hold some truth to anglers, some truth, some not, right? But there's no scientific paper on that. So to me, why not be able to utilize that, right? But we also have to give back to them. So how are we going to do this? So in the long term, that eBird example is kind of, 20 years from now, maybe something that we could get and utilize and develop. And education will be a byproduct, whether we're educating the angler or we're educating students or we're educating the public, right? Depending on what the use is. But the first step is being able to understand anglers. How do you understand anglers, right? We can put out volunteer surveys. We can do these things. We've been trying to understand them, but there's still this gap and there's still this anger. So I have gone to many different events. I've gone to different angler clubs, and I have been actually going out and taking surveys from recreational anglers in New Jersey. And I wanted to identify specific factors associated with fishing preferences. I wanted to identify what level of distrust do they have. I wanted to figure out what fish were they most upset about, what regulations were they most upset about. If there was going to be some kind of technology developed, what would they want? Would they want their fishing spots kept a secret? Would they want a fishing log developed in there, right? So just to know in the way future, if you're waiting for grants, you need to know what people actually want. What are they going to actually use? And what are their concerns? So some of the questions that I put out in my survey, I wanted to kind of pull them in initially with, what are you most angry about, right? Because I go to these angler clubs and I speak, and typically what my model has been, is what has been most successful, is I'll go and I'll give a 15, 20-minute educational talk because they don't know what MRIP is. They don't know how, they just know that there's regulations. Oh, they don't care what they're saying. Who's they, right? Like, I'm not going there to try to tell them necessarily what's right and what's wrong. I'm just going there in an educational sense, and I talk to them about what is a fish stock. I go and I talk to them about how do we understand and how do we calculate what a fish stock is. Here are the organizations that do that, right? And they don't know this, a lot of them. Some of them do, but not, some of them don't. And so I'm going in and doing this, and then some of them they have a lot of questions, and then some of them get really angry, and then they ask more questions, and it becomes sort of like an educational, fun setting, right? And then at the end, when everyone's all riled up, then I say, take my survey, right? Put it all down so I can quantify this. And so as of right now, I looked this morning, and I have 697 responses, so I was close to 700. But I'm giving out my survey at these events, and it's through Qualtrics. So their information is not taken, right? There's certain questions that I wasn't able to ask just for ethical purposes, but I'm trying to get information from across the state, going to bait shops, I'm going to saltwater expos, giving academic talks. It's been shared on social media. And so this is also a terrible model that when I talk to my students about this, right, I say, you're supposed to have a hypothesis first when you start, but I didn't want to go in and say, oh, well, all the female fishermen are going to be saying this, and all of the people from North Jersey are going to be saying this. I didn't want to go in with a specific item I was trying to prove, but have my hypotheses be more emergent. And I have this huge data set now that we can pull questions from, or pull answers from, I should say. And I think that I'll be able to, because there's also text boxes, we could do quantitative analysis. Because I've asked a variety of questions, we'll be able to do different kinds of quantitative analysis as well. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to piece together sort of the perceptions of saltwater anglers. And then if people from the state want to use this, right? I'm speaking at AFS in about a month, and I told them that I would have some preliminary data. So I have to take those 700 responses now, and then in a month, hopefully, because I, talked with them and gathered information about what they wanted to know. And now I'm going to be hopefully doing some quick analyses, some basic statistics, and then being able to share that with the scientific community to say, oh, the public feels like this, or they generally feel like this, right? And it's just this, there's so many nuances that, I could account for this, may not have accounted for this, but this is at least a starting point, right? And so here are some of the questions that I've asked, where I looked at demographics, some of the initial perceptions. Do they feel that they have knowledge on certain species? Do they feel like they don't have knowledge? Do they feel like their fishing actually has an impact? Do they feel like it doesn't have an impact? Then I can figure out, are those things correlated? Are anglers who are primarily targeting winter flounder, do they feel a different way as compared to someone else who's targeting a different species, right? So there's so many different items that I'll be able to pull out and hopefully try to shed light on based on how people are feeling to potentially, allow the state to know how to maybe drive education, or how they can go out and do some outreach based on where they know people are most hurt, essentially. So this would be sort of like what the survey looks like. They kind of go in, it's quick. Well, I shouldn't say quick. I say, people tell me it takes about 10, 15 minutes if they actually read the questions. So there's some check boxes. This is going to be, like I said, anonymous. It's not collecting any information about the person. And this is going to be put into Qualtrics. I have not used Qualtrics for analysis, so we're going to see how that goes for the next month. But here are some more examples, right? So are people most distrustful on a regional level or on a local level, right? Do people have knowledge on the following, right? Do they feel like they have knowledge on the conditions needed for larval or juvenile fish, right? Or do they know how to sex a fish between male and female? And so in the short term, I'm hoping that we can gain a local understanding of our anglers, gain trust, and honestly, going and meeting them and talking with them one-on-one has been a great experience. It's been very eye-opening, and I think that people just want to put their voices out there. They feel like they're not listened to, and I'm providing at least a way that sort of a tool where this could be sort of like an interface between sharing from the angler's perspective and then having a huge data set being analyzed in the same way to give back to some of the researchers at these conferences. So in the long term, maybe being able to bridge the gap a little bit better, share this with students, share this with other researchers or people in the future. So if you want to take it, share it. There's the QR code. If people need the link, that's sort of the method that I've been using. But I appreciate you listening to this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Your presentation, I think, really highlights the importance of good data collection, sampling, and trying to account for any possible issues of sampling error and skewing data, because to the extent that we rely on research for important policy and other management decisions, to collect data without being aware of things that affect where you're getting it, the attitudes, the prevailing attitudes and beliefs, it could be dangerous. But it's great to hear that you're trying to address these and account for that type of response style. So that's great work. Okay, so Mr. John Weber is going to be our next presenter. He's going to present on curbing ocean plastic pollution at the source. Whoops, and John,
Okay.
handing you the baton.
Okay. Is there also is there one of these? There was one of these. Oh, okay. Great. Oh, questions for.
Keep going.
Okay. Here we go. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for having me. Thanks Marco for inviting me, and Tony and his crew. I want to say I love this mic stand. I think it came with the building. Original 1880s mic stand. It's great. So I'm going to talk about plastic. Quick commercial about Oceana. If you don't know, we haven't had a presence in New Jersey before. We are actually the largest NGO on the planet that only works in ocean conservation. A lot of that work is international. We're in 11 countries. A lot of that work's on fisheries. We like sustainable fisheries. Of course, we work on plastic pollution. In the United States, we're also working to stop offshore oil drilling, and we have a specific campaign to save the North Atlantic right whale. So I've really enjoyed this morning's presentation. But on to plastic. So what's the problem? I guess it's a problem if you're this dolphin and there's a plastic bag on your dorsal fin. I have a feeling most people know the problem pretty good, so I'm going to go through this pretty fast. But this is more of the problem. 33 billion pounds of plastic enter the ocean every day. It's 2 garbage trucks full every day. It's a massive amount. That's not what we make. That's not how much we throw away. That's how much enters the marine environment. This is from the bottom of the Mediterranean, probably, 900 feet deep. At first I thought this was a crab walking on a beach at night in bright light, but it's at the bottom of the ocean, and this crab has found a plastic bag. We all know that clear plastic especially looks like jellyfish. That's what turtles eat, so this is infamous part of the plastic problem. Animals mistaking it for food. They did a study, I want to say it was in 2019, of 102 dead sea turtles. Every single one of them had plastics in their digestive system. So a lot of them end up like this. Baby sperm whale, and in case it's not obvious, over here on this side, these are human beings. And they're lying on a tennis court, and this is all the plastic that was found inside that baby sperm whale. So this is our Laysan albatross. I assure you nothing in their diet is this color blue. This is an adult regurgitating partially digested food to feed to their young. That's what they do, and the result is that. What kills me about this slide is that a storm's going to come and take all that plastic and take it back out to the ocean, and the whole thing could start over again. That's what's super sad. That's Midway Island, and if you don't know, that's midway between Hawaii and Japan. It's very far out in the middle of the ocean. So the other part of the problem is this is a headline from 2018. I'm going to give you the update to this headline, but microplastics are found in humans. And now the update to the headline is we have found the microplastics in every single organ that we have looked at. We get these science briefings at Oceana, and it's like this week, it's, they found it in the liver. And next week, we found it in the kidneys. They find it everywhere they look, including brains, including human breast milk. So problem. So what's driving this problem is this. This is the amount of production, okay? This stat's actually, I think, 5 years old, so this is from 2019. So a lot of plastic production. I have a quick animation here. This is only plastic bottles. This shows you how much, and this one's also 5 years old, what we make in a minute. You'll see in the animation there's a human in a big garbage truck, and we're only going to play it for a minute. But you will see before the minute's over, the human being is covered, and then the garbage truck will be covered. I will remind you, this is only plastic water bottles. Think of everything else made of plastic on the planet. And by the time the minute is over, we will get to 1 million. And that's what it looks like. There's one comes at you. It's sobering. Please do not ask me for this graphic. This is not Oceana. This is Thomson Reuters, and we probably paid money to use that, and we were allowed to use it in presentations like this. So that's a minute's worth of plastic water bottle production. If you let it go for a day, that's what it looks like. The Eiffel Tower is darn near 1,000 feet tall. If you let it go for a month, that's what it looks like. Again, this is only bottles. And if you let it go for 10 years, it's, much of Queens. maybe it's covering some other towns, I'm not really sure. So there's a lot of plastic, and this is the problem. So here it is on a graph. This is everything else has been very scientific this morning. This is, I have a couple kind of sciencey graphs. This is also 10 years old, so scratch this out. It'll triple by 2050, but we're still on that same pace because somebody crunched all these numbers basically 10 years ago. So that's the problem, okay? You'll see in this one, it highlights really what packaging, 36% of all these different sectors of what this plastic is going to. 36%, this is packaging. This is stuff that basically gets used once to deliver something somewhere or get it to us, and then it's thrown away. So that is a huge problem. Oh, that was not supposed to happen there. Oh, there we go. There's an animation. And that's the problem with plastic. It's made to last forever. That's also what makes it really super useful to people and has a lot of great applications. And our lives would not be the same or maybe as good, but we've got to solve that. So to talk about solutions, I'm going to talk about inadequate solutions, solutions that don't work first. Maybe you're thinking about recycling. Let me get you off that for a second. This is a global statistic, okay? Certainly in countries like ours, it's better. It's probably like 6%. And in states like ours that are really good about recycling, it's probably more like 8 or 9%. And this is covering true recycling, meaning it gets turned back into the same product. If you took something and turned it into another product, downcycling, so to speak, the plastic that gets turned into Trex lumber and whatnot, that's not included in this. And the reason is that end product is then not recyclable, so that ultimately gets thrown away. So the point is it's low, and recycling, we're not going to recycle ourselves out of this problem. And that graph from before, this also shows why we are never, even if recycling became super awesome and almost 100% recycling today, we would not catch up with tomorrow's plastic production. So we're not going to recycle our way out of this at all. We don't think burning plastics is the solution at all either. Some huge problems with that. Toxic emissions, greenhouse gas implications. In many places it is called, they call it renewable, and depend on the laws of where you're at, they get to count that as recycling. Waste to energy we don't think should count as recycling. There's a lot of ways to make energy. We don't need to burn plastic and whatnot. So this is another one that's not a solution, okay? Everybody has that weird person in their Instagram feed that's like, I avoided all plastic and I saved all my trash for a month and it fits in this little jar here, right? Everybody's seen that. There's that strange person. That's nice, and it's nice to see that it's possible. We should not have to live our lives like that, okay? We should not push this problem onto the consumer and say, well, you just have to, avoid plastic. That's not really fair. So we do not think that that's what we should be doing. What we should be doing is passing policies that reduce plastic use, but reduce plastic at the source is really where that's at. Plastic-free zones. I mean, it sounds kind of weird, but there are things. There are, airlines that have tried this, and other, events and festivals that are plastic-free. But the big one is getting companies to offer us plastic-free choices. That is super important, super big. Big headline from, maybe a month ago. Oceana worked with, maybe that's the right word, we worked with Amazon, and we got them to stop using the bubble mailers. Literally, they're going to use 1 billion fewer bubble mailers because we put pressure on. We found out that they did it in other countries. Like, they got rid of the plastic wrap bubble mailer in other countries, but this is their hugest market, so we kind of put the pressure on. We knew it was possible to have them do it there. So I'll spend a few minutes talking about federal legislation here. There's a bunch, and there's state legislation too. I'm happy to talk about it. I just don't have slides about it. There's a big one called the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. That one it would nationalize a lot of the things that we've had success with on state levels, states here in the Mid-Atlantic especially. So Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act does things like, bans thin plastic bags nationally, like a bunch of states, New York and New Jersey and Delaware and Maryland, they've done this. It bans styrofoam in foodware. Again, like a bunch of states have done. I believe it puts 10 states have a bottle deposit law, deposit return system. This would do one of those nationally. And it also, really importantly, it says we're not going to build any new production facilities for single-use plastics or cheap, throwaway plastics until the EPA comes out with regulations for the air emissions from these plants. So no new, cracker plants in Pennsylvania until we can get a hold on this. Another, break free from plastic pollution is big enough and comprehensive enough. It's probably wouldn't pass in this Congress, quite frankly, but components of it, parts of it really have a chance of passing. So some of these other ones are components of it. Farewell to Foam Act, that's just, bans styrofoam, just like New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Colorado, and California. 50 million people in this country are living under a foam ban, and it's okay. Like, we're getting by. It's not that bad. Plastic Pellets Free Waters Act. Plastic pellets, some people call them nurdles. Who is familiar with plastic pellet nurdles? Do you know what I'm talking about? Some people, this is good. This is the raw material of plastic production. Okay, they're like BB-looking things. I can't believe I didn't bring I have a jar of them. I found all of them on the beaches of New Jersey. It's the raw material for an industrial process. How come I can find them on the beach in New Jersey or anywhere? Kind of, I've gotten good at it. I can find them pretty much anywhere. This bill would simply let the EPA regulate plastic pellets. They are transported by rail and by road and by waterways, and there are pellet spills. Train derails or a container ship sinks. If you want to Google, not wait till I'm done, but if you want to Google Hong Kong nurdle spill, and nurdle is spelled N-U-R, a container ship full of these things, sank, and there's nurdles on the beach, and it looks like snow, and they're shoveling plastic pellets that are this big. They're like the size of fish eggs, so it's bad stuff. And this last one should be very easy, reducing waste in national parks. Let's just have national parks where we get off single-use plastic and we're not selling single-use plastic water bottles and whatnot. They're alternatives, just like they have in the airports or your kid's school. Let's have a water bottle refilling station, simple stuff like that. So there are things that we can do that's going to get at plastic production, get at single-use plastic use especially, and that's where we want to focus our attention. And we just want to turn off the faucet. That's it. I imagine there'll be questions, so I will leave this. Do I leave this up? Do I do the next slide? I don't know I'm curious, what's the next slide? What should I do?
Leave it up.
Oh, there we go. Oh, and I'm so happy that there's a nice wave and surfers in this, because those are surfers. So thanks very much.
John, thank you for a very enlightening presentation.
Is that enlightening or frightening?
Well, I guess a little bit of, the frightening part was part of being enlightened. The graphics, the video, it just drives home a really important point. Wonderful presentations from all three of the speakers on some very important work. We have some time, maybe about 7 minutes or so, 8 minutes for some questions and hopefully some answers, or at least some good thoughts. So there's 1 or 2 remote microphones around. And Judith, is that a hand? And if we could maybe just clarify which presenter the question goes to, if it's specific to one.
I'm talking about plastic.
Okay.
It's very well and good to pass legislation, but it has to be enforced. And in New York passed a plastic bag law 4 years ago. There are neighborhoods around the city where there are hundreds of large supermarkets still giving out plastic bags. And there's a guy, a hero, an unsung hero, who goes around every weekend to different neighborhoods and has a spreadsheet, and he keeps for each store. And he keeps the spreadsheet, and he fills out the complaint to the office in DEC that's supposed to take care of this. And so he's been sending them these reports for 4 years. And once in a while, a store switches and stops giving out plastic bags. And then very often it goes back because all the other stores in the neighborhood are still giving out plastic bags. So passing a law is well and good, but you have to have enforcement. And in New York State, it's disgusting.
More of a comment than a question. I don't argue with you. I live in New Jersey. We have a similar law. I think it's better adhered to, although I will say in New Jersey, our law banned thin plastic bags, styrofoam and foodware, and straws. And my pet peeve is that the least followed part of that law is the straws. Does everybody know that it's straws on request? They're not supposed to put a straw in your drink unless you ask for it. And it is very much not followed. I could get very deep in the weeds as to the regulations and why that is, but I agree. Enforcement.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question quickly?
course.
To Susan? I just was wondering how you define an ocean acidification hotspot. This is something we're interested in at Marco.
Okay. What that means is that there are certain. It's not a constant situation where there's saturation level that's that low. But what it means is that during the course of the year, they'll have times when it does dip down into the saturation state where it can impact shellfish. So that's what that is. And there's one in Gulf of Maine as well. So this isn't a constant thing yet. This is just happening over the year. Every now and then when they're testing, they'll see, the saturation state is low. So that's what that is. But that's happening now. So we're starting to get like periodic localized areas where that's happening.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mary?
Hi, thank you for these presentations. This is about plastics. We're always trying to do good as environmental organizations to maybe consider using compostable plastics. What do you think about those? Are those things really worth the effort? I know they have to be, once they're buried, they don't degrade, but is there any way to actually use them and properly then get the benefits?
Okay, so the thing with compostable anything is there an industrial composting facility near you where they're going to? And I don't know where you live. I'm guessing the answer is probably no. I will give you an example. We just had this giant music festival in Asbury Park called See Here Now, and there was a composting component, and I was actually part of that, helping people compost. And even though a lot of the vendors said, well, no, we spent the extra money and we got the compostable forks or the whatever, and we're like, no, food waste here, everything else is in the garbage, because they didn't even want to deal with, is it really compostable, and it was just easier that way. And knowing that there's no, in industrial such facilities, even though this was going to, it wasn't making compost, it was making gas. So generally, no, better on the production end, maybe, if they didn't use fossil fuels to make that throwaway fork. But the real thing is just maybe go with reuse. I mean, I just came back from Ireland and summer vacation. Every tourist trap, Cliffs of Moher, museum, visitor center, whatever, they all had a very fine and well-appointed, place to eat your lunch, and they all gave you coffee and a real cup and a real saucer and real flatware and real plates and dishes. And I know there's a dishwasher in the back. I'm like, we could just do that here, so.
Questions? In the back?
Somebody ask a fish question. I want you to get a fish question.
Hi. So we're here at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Council, and as we sort of know, a lot of the issues, species, systems that we work with are hardly regional in nature. So in terms of when we try to approach solutions for these issues, how do we, in your opinion, should we be working to sort of breach past our jurisdiction, or do we think we need to be focused more on sort of trying to keep our side of the street clean in that regard?
Is that a plastic
Dana,
question?
would you like to address that? That's not putting you on the spot. I think I just did, didn't I? But
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm gonna probably say a little bit of both, and I'm gonna be biased and say a way to address that at its base is gonna be through education, right? Because whether we're doing this here, or you're doing it at the level at the high school, you're doing it at the colleges, you know, you're getting people to understand what the problems are now and locally, and then maybe be able to contribute to some kind of beach cleanup, plastic cleanup, maybe making that part of your class, or, you know, having an independent project where the students are, you know, looking at some of those local issues or researching local issues. But also, now that you're addressing it to students as they're growing, they're going to take that with them when they're making decisions about, you know, for example, I'll have students do, this is sort of at the lower level, but I'll have them research a company that they like. So a company, if they like Nike, or they like, you know, they never think about how do they treat their workers, where are they getting their resources from. And so even getting them to an intro thinking question when you start class, you're waiting for kids to file in, or, you know, just being able to ask those kinds of questions gets them to start to think. And so even though you might be addressing it sort of at the local level based on what they can do, I think I'm hoping that those implications, and if we have educators that are doing this, and you're not going to have all great educators either who are doing this, right? There's going to be some educators that are going to have misconceptions, and you can address this maybe in the certain departments or science department potentially, but then, you know, there could be a student who's growing up and then they don't even encounter this until they get to the college level, or any kind of thoughts that are about sustainability, or they maybe see or hear parts of these kinds of problems, but they don't really see it until they see it, essentially.
if I could, maybe that's a, you know, very great thoughts. If I could also maybe add a couple, and I know I didn't present other than to moderate, but I think your question sort of brings up at least two thoughts. One is that I think research, data collection needs to be dynamic in nature, and I think that's the nature of your question about, for example, different species are more prevalent in certain areas at one time of the year than others. So it begs the question is, how is the data collected? Does it account for the dynamic nature? We don't, for example, we don't have tunas really in New Jersey in December, January, February, or March. So if you're collecting data on tuna in New Jersey from December to March, you're probably out of luck. So I think one, it's sort of the time dynamic element of the question. I think a second thought is that in data collection, not only is it data collection, but it's data sharing, which I think speaks to the importance of something like Marco and how data research is disseminated and to different agencies, and that different agencies collaborate on that. In my work with the proposed Hudson Canyon Sanctuary Advisory Council, one of the things that we've been really wanting to do is to bring everyone to the table, because everyone has so much rich information to share. Holding on to a piece of information by yourself at your, for example, at your university in your research project, holding on to it by yourself really doesn't do everyone else much good. But being able to share it, for example, in a forum like this, brings together so many different perspectives to really look at it on a different level. So I think we are out of time for this presentation. Thank you for your time with this panel, and thanks again to the presenters. Tony?